Well, hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. I am excited to have you here, so welcome. Thank you for tuning in. I know you could listen to tons of different things, and the fact that you're here, it truly means a lot. So really quick, two things. Key holder coaching groups, the peer-to-peer mastermind groups that we've been running now, going on 3 years. The 5th cohort is about to start in the spring of this year. So if you thought maybe I should get together with a group of other like-minded, experienced coffee shop owners that are there to help each other succeed, you get encouragement, clarity, insights, and just a dedicated perspective of mutual support over the course of 6 months. That's what we do at Key Holder Coaching Groups. If you're interested in applying to be a member in this group, go ahead and email Chris at keystotheshop.com, or you can click on the link to go fill out the application in the show notes. Also, those of you who have thought about consulting and coaching, it would be great to just reach out. Click the link for the discovery calls, or you can just email me directly to just start a conversation. Coaching and consulting is something I spend a lot of time doing throughout the year, and this is a fresh year. We are signing on new clients to help either starting cafes or a lot of people who already have cafes but really need some outside perspective in refinement, assessment, and coaching through to the next level. Go ahead and email Chris at keystotheshop.com. Now, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at the Barista Series from Pacific. Go to pacificfoodservice.com, get samples of their oat, their almond, their macadamia, all of the lineup of beverages that they have to offer at Pacific Food Service that is designed specifically for professional baristas. And that's why it stands up to the heat from steaming. It tastes amazing. It has great balance that keeps the flavor focused on the coffee. And baristas love it. Customers love it. You should try it for yourself. So go to pacificfoodservice.com, get those samples. And if you're looking for the best plant-based beverages for your customers, then go with the originals. Go with these folks who have been doing this for decades and decades. I mean, they have been here supporting the industry for so long with their products, with their time, and just they love coffee, and it shows in their product. So pacificfoodservice.com. Let's jump into the content. I was doing a webinar. Sarah Naylor put on this webinar called Coffee Business Connection. It happened on January 2nd and 3rd, and I presented on different systems and leadership methodologies that can help grow your cafe and your people. And a question came in from my friend Joe over at Espresso State of Mind, Joe Gonzalez, T.O. Joe. And I'm really grateful for it because it really made me think. And I was thinking, I didn't really have a lot of time during that session to expound upon this. And so now I'm taking this episode as a way to answer that question. And if you ever have a question about something and you feel like maybe that would make a good episode, you're probably right. And I could answer your question here on the show, give you a shout out of your cafe and all that fun stuff, but I would be happy to. So just send your email and we can go from there. But here is the question, and it is all about how do you unify baristas across multiple cafes? And that is a huge question. And so I'm going to attempt to, as best I can, answer that question, because even if you don't have multiple cafes right now, you probably are going to have maybe 2 cafes. That's multiple cafes, 1 times 2. And so that is going to be just as much a challenge, and maybe even more so for the people that are going from 1 to 2 to manage those groups as it will be for 3 or 4 people. So before we get started, you really need to understand that the unification of baristas across cafes is an effort to make sure that the customer is getting a great experience every time under the banner of that brand. So if you are a place that prides itself on your signature beverages you want to make sure those signature beverages taste the same and are served with the same kind of hospitality. The values of your business are intact and are being expressed consistently. And of course, every person kind of adds their own flavor, but it's not divergent to the point of being against your values, right? So there's diversity of expression, but there's unity of value. That's what we're going for. And unity of standards, unity of the experience. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is you got to have standards. And if you are going to unify a group of people across cafes and you try to do it by rallying people to a well, this is what we believe, and we are a huge part of the story of coffee, and we're all about trying to create a great last handoff of the work of the farmer to the customer. And you use a lot of words that basically are trying to get people amped up, but you don't provide a unified set of standards for how we communicate, how we behave towards each other, how we behave towards the customer, how we treat the product and the place that we're serving. The way that we think, even in the space, is part of what I think a professional does. I'm not just there to clock in and work without also offering a sense that I am there to actually learn and grow myself. And I know I'm going to do that just personally, but I want to learn and grow in such a way that helps the business learn and grow. Businesses do learn. And this is true because organizations have something called organizational wisdom. We have intuition that gets developed. And it all starts from a common set of standards, from how we steam oat milk to how we greet customers, what wiping down a table looks like, and everything in between. So there's the big picture of what we're here to do, the mission, the vision, and then there's the values that we use. That's at the heart of all of the minutia and the stuff that we do in the cafe every day. And if that stuff is not actually written and known, then unification of staff across multiple cafes is going to be virtually impossible, because everybody's got their own interpretation. And that what they'll do is they'll pull a card that says, well, this community is a little bit different. That doesn't work here. Well, it does work here. We just have to figure out a way to express these common values in a way that's most appropriate for this community. But it's not like those values don't apply. If you're a leader, you need to be there to promote and train people in the values and the behaviors and the technical expertise and skills that really just amounts to your brand, what people remember you for when they leave. They were prompt, they were aware, they were friendly, they're consistent, it was comfortable there, everything tasted great, and it was well lit, and things were clean. I'm just listing off things that are basics, but if we haven't developed standards for these things and are not actively training people on those standards, then unification is not going to happen, because you have an all-staff meeting and where you gas people up, show them a video of farmers, whatever it is that we think is going to happen, right? So standards has to be the first thing. And now I mentioned leadership, okay? Leadership is the next thing. Leadership distribution. Let's say that you have gone from 1 to 2 cafes, and I consult people a lot about this scaling. What do we do to go from 1 to 2? I've got someone right now who's almost there. And most of the work that we're doing right now has to do with leadership distribution, clarity of expectation of those leaders so that they can be the specialists for that cafe. Because truly, even though we have a unified value set and standards and all of this stuff that we need, we also have a unique expression of our business because those customers are kind of different. That group of baristas is kind of different. There's a different flavor to it, a nuance, if you will, right? And that person needs to be there that can see it and be the leader of that group of people. To be a manager of 2 cafes at once is often, I think, an exercise in futility. At a certain point, it starts to become too much. There's too many people to have one-on-ones with, and so you stop having one-on-ones. There's too many P&Ls to manage. There's too many issues popping up here and there, playing whack-a-mole with machine maintenance, HVAC systems, and all of this other stuff that a manager of a coffee shop really should be empowered to focus on. But when you give them too much to focus on, or you think that you can have multiple cafes with a general manager over all those cafes, I will tell you that I firmly believe it may work for a little bit, but you're not going to get away with it for very long without sacrificing something. Because of the nature of a coffee shop, you need that shop's person, a manager. And that manager is answerable to a general manager, or if you don't have one, then yourself as the owner. So instead of trying to, as the owner, let's say you have 2 or 3 shops and you have 25 baristas or something like that, instead of saying, I'm going to try to manage all this myself, I'm going to meet with all those baristas, we're just going to keep on sending tons of Slack messages, and I'm just going to try to keep it all together. It's better for you to manage 2 managers and equip them with clarity, resourcing, and training to be able to lead that group of people well, to manage the daily business of the coffee shop. And I think that each cafe needs its own manager. So leadership distribution really helps unify everything, because you're able to create a centralized point of clarity for each store. And when you meet with your managers, you can refine that message so that the way you communicate now to the manager has to be in a way that, once they communicate it to the staff, it will be clear. So in order to unify everybody in multiple cafes, you also have to adjust the way that you communicate. So if you used to have one cafe with 4 baristas and you are wistful and you just kind of sigh to yourself looking out the window and think, boy, I miss the good old days when it was just so simple. And the reason why it's complicated is because we haven't changed the way we communicate. We're still communicating in a 4-person, 1 cafe way rather than a 20-person, 3 cafes way, which means the clarity and directness that you use needs to increase. How explicit you are and how many questions you answer preemptively in your communication needs to increase. Because once it goes from the manager then to the baristas, just like any game of telephone, it inevitably it might change a little bit, or it enters into the atmosphere of that cafe, and then it goes a little this way or a little that way. So aim small, miss small. So if you want to hit the bullseye, aim for the middle of the bullseye. Just don't aim for the perimeter of the bullseye. So if you have multiple cafes, you've got to level up your expectations of yourself in the way that you're disciplined in your communication. And if you find that your words aren't landing or the techniques aren't effective, then you need to change your techniques in the way you're communicating. A big part of this, of course, is supporting your leadership. And we have tons of episodes about management on this show. So it'd be kind of interesting to see what the total number is about management. And the reason why we have so much is because I do believe that one of the biggest issues in coffee shops is poor management. And poor management sometimes is a result of just not being set up for success. If you're not set up for success, it's hard to do a really great job. And so I would encourage you to think about the world of your manager. Think about what it means to be a manager. You've got 2 different groups of people to answer to. You've got yourself as the owner, or maybe you and your partner, and then you've got the baristas. And now we're also thinking about the customers as well. So there's a bunch of different directions of judgment and assessment of their work. And it's difficult to be a manager. That's why so many of them burn out. They're given very little direction, very little resourcing and clarity, not very much affirmation and praise for work done or even work noticed. That's good. And so you end up with managers who go toxic or kind of crumble, or you promote people to a position of manager too quickly because you yourself don't even understand what it looks like to be a manager in your cafe and what your cafe needs. And so we just cycle through a lot of bad choices. So here's where I think if you want to unify the team, obviously you have to select the right people that are actually very, very good at carrying out the values and standards of your business. But you've got to support those people because they're the ones who will have those meetings with people. They're baristas. They're the ones who will say, "Hey, that's not quite right. Let's fix that." You'd like them to do that. If a barista is making a cappuccino and it doesn't look very good, well, we've got a manager there that really should be able to have the margin of time and energy and space to address that. And if you haven't given them the tools, the time, the attention, etc., to do that work, then having a manager is just you saying, I'd like to pay more for this person's labor, but also I'd like to not let them do really good work, right? That doesn't make sense. So support your leadership, and that leadership will support the business much more. And by the way, maybe it goes without saying, but I have to say it. The first level of support of a manager, on top of all of what I've just said, is of course you've got to pay them a fair wage for what they're doing, especially for the amount of effort that goes into being a leader in a cafe. Many people have become managers, and they might even be good managers, but because of the pressure, it just they have to leave. And maybe if they were being paid enough, it would have helped. And a lot of managers are not being paid nearly enough. So you gotta be generous with this position because it is the linchpin of your cafe. It holds a lot of things together. Now, one of the things I'd like to bring up about unifying your team is you actually have to track and address things as they happen. So tracking is a big thing, where tracking means every employee, a manager should be paying attention to their performance. How are they doing at work? How are they doing with hospitality, with cleaning, with checklists, with side work, with deep cleaning, or making drinks, making sandwiches? What does it look like for their, do they do a good close? Do they do a good open? How do you know? Have you seen it? Is it written down somewhere? Could you refer back to how was this barista in 2018 in the fall? That level of granularity when it comes to knowing your staff allows you to speak with knowledge of them because you've been paying attention enough to have written that at all. This is what I'm talking about when I mean margin of time for managers to manage. You could never do that if they were just stuck in the back room doing reports, working on your pet projects and your special projects as an owner, that you're just like, I've got somebody who's like my pack mule for my bad ideas, and I'm just going to make them do all these weird research projects, and then I'm going to complain about how the cafe is not really living up to our standards. We'll stop treating them like your special project mule. One thing that we need to do again is track, to pay attention, to write down, and then address things that come up that need to be addressed so that what we're doing in the cafe doesn't deviate so far from the standard that we set. Because again, right back to the beginning of this episode, the idea that we want to unify things means that there are some deviations. And we anticipate that because of the size of the business, deviations are almost expected. You have to pay a little bit more attention. And that attention comes in the form of having a file where you keep records of their wins, their challenges, what you've done to affirm and praise and encourage, reward, what you've done to coach, correct, discipline, etc., the challenges that they're having. That's necessary in every cafe. Frequency is a huge part of this. Don't just say, well, we have a yearly review. If all you have is a yearly review, you might as well not have a review, because there's too much that happens even in a given set of a week or 2 weeks that goes unnoticed, that plants the seed or lays the foundation, or whatever metaphor you want to use, for good or bad. And if you're not encouraging the good, or if you're not catching the bad, and correcting, then both of those things are going to be wasted. And you're just going to get what you get. And honestly, that's what customers expect these days from coffee shops. They get what they get because we accept that from ourselves, from the way we run our cafes. So the other thing I want to talk about here is accountability. Unification across a cafe has to do with trust also. Trust that the people that you have trained and equipped will be able to carry out what you do. And if, because you're tracking, because you're managing and you're there with them working as a leader, and your managers are doing that, you know that they have the capacity to do it. So you don't need to take back that authority, do it for them, and like subvert the authority of your manager. You have to respect that people have been trained by you. You hired them for a very good reason, we hope, right? And you've trained them very well. Now that trust needs to turn into empowerment to do that work. That doesn't mean hands off. I'm not a big fan of hands off, but it does mean give them some room. Give them some room. Just like when you lock in a portafilter, you want a little bit of headroom, right? At the top of that puck of espresso, because a lot of times seen people pack in too much into the filter, they lock it in, and then the dispersion screw makes an indentation right at the top, and it causes channeling, because now that puck of coffee where you might have spent all this time distributing, you put too much in there, and you were so tight-fisted, so tight in the room and in the portafilter that it just wrecked the whole thing. So when it comes to your staff, you need to give room for them to operate and not be so. I tend to not like using the word micromanaging, because most people are just not managing enough. But there is a such thing as micromanaging. And if you've gone through this process of developing a trusted, skilled, invested in, coached, dynamic team, and yet you persist on just like, then that's different than accountability. That's just meddling at that point. Verifying, affirming, correcting, guiding, coaching, that's fine. Put it into a system, a trusted system of how we do that on a regular basis. I'm not saying you need to let bad things happen just because you're afraid of asserting yourself, but I think we all know when it goes a little bit overboard. But we do have to have accountability as a part of our process also when it comes to our own leadership. So unifying a whole group of people, that group of people has to look at leadership and be bought into the idea that leadership is actually for them, like on their side in a sense, right? I'm not saying anything we want as a group of baristas should be given to us because that proves that they're on our side. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is, do they listen? Do they consider? Have they acted in our best interest as it relates to what we need to do the work in this cafe? And if you can say yes to all those things, you're way more likely to get a unified group of people because they trust that the company, quote unquote, that's you, that the leadership represents the company, is on their side. And their side, they is the group of baristas. And what that role and all of that world that they occupy needs to happen. What needs to happen in that world? What tools do they need? Do you fix things? Do you know what it's like to work that closing checklist that you gave us? Sometimes I wonder, do you get back to us when you say you are? Are you going to follow through? You're going to keep your promises? There's so many points at which we give ourselves an excuse for dropping the ball, and then we wonder why we can't get buy-in. We can't get unified groups. So it does start with leadership. And it means you have to build trust. And the accountability goes both ways. You are accountable to them. As a leader, you're the chief servant of a group of people. So it's that whole upside down triangle thing where, the leader's here and everyone else is up there. You're supporting them. So last thing I'm going to say is kind of an extra, kind of a bonus is, meetings do help if they're done the right way. And don't multiply meetings just because you think if we all get together, magic will happen. You need to have a plan. You need to have a strategy for it. You need to have an agenda that is we are all here in it it's needed for us to meet, right? A lot of meetings could have been emails. We know that. But a team meeting on a quarterly basis, all hands meeting, is actually pretty good. Even if it wasn't quarterly, but it was every 6 months, something where everybody in the multiple cafes gets together, and it's really just about praise, affirmation, celebration, transparency. It's not time to say, hey, everybody, we need to step it up with our bathrooms. Listen, that's a staff meeting per cafe. But when you get the whole group together in multiple cafes, you shouldn't be talking about big corrective measures. Maybe there's some things about the company that you want to announce, but keep it positive when it comes to these big meetings. When there's challenging pieces of information, if you bring this large group together, you're asking for trouble. I'm not saying you shouldn't share it, but you should share it in a way that is a little bit more strategic, maybe cafe to cafe, different groups of baristas and that kind of thing. So I do think that having these even just quarterly all staff meetings can be very helpful. Keep them short, keep them celebratory, positive, give account of what we've accomplished, give credit to them for that accomplishment. And really, again, that's servant leadership. It's like we and you. That's the language we use in those meetings. But meaningful staff meetings when it comes to cafe, that's also something I'm a big fan of. We've talked about this on past episodes. Monthly staff meetings in the cafes can be very effective if they're just 1 hour every month to say, here's how we did, here's some of our challenges, here's some stuff coming up. We've all talked individually because we're having weekly or at the least bi-weekly one-on-ones with every staff member for 15 to 20 minutes. Like this is just good communication hygiene. So having these meaningful and substantial, like the content of it is focused on what is it? The values. It's the values. It's the execution. It's the skills, the technicalities, the experience that we're offering. Like this is how we stay focused and unified as a company, is by having these types of meetings and having that kind of leadership cafe to cafe, by holding ourselves accountable as leadership to serve well and equip people well to support, and by having these standards in place to begin with, and to hire people that want to come into the business and have already got those values that we really want to see in the daily business of the cafe. When you get all of that together, that is when unity across multiple cafes is just a bygone conclusion. You got to work for it, of course. And this is why I'm not a big fan of rapid scaling, because you can see there's a lot of work that goes into growing. There's a lot of adjustments that need to be made. It's not impossible, but slow growth with intentionality and equipping people well to do great work, that's better. And that's what we want. Hopefully this episode was helpful. Joe, I would be curious, how did we do? And if you are listening and you have the same question, how did I do? What are we missing here? You can let me know some things that have worked for you to unify your team across different cafes. Sure, there's many other methodologies that have worked for you as an operator. Always open to hear those. But yeah, that's all we have today. And if you have questions, go ahead and email chris@keystotheshop.com. If you're interested in coaching and consulting, maybe you have multiple cafes and you would like assessments, or you would like coaching for you and your leadership team to help bring things up a level for your business, go ahead and email chris@keystotheshop.com. And with that, I'm going to say goodbye. Thanks, everybody. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.